Good afternoon. My name is Alicia Goforth. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Directors for Las Sendas. As we've done for the past few months, I am going to give the recap of the board meeting, which was held on June 25th. The meetings primarily start out with community reports from our president of the board, our treasurer of the board, and our executive director for our management team. I'm going to start with the treasurer report. The board treasurer, Mike Peckham, prepares and presents the monthly financials every month. We will start with our key performance indicators. As you can see, we have an operating cash position of $1.6 million, which is 3.8 months of operating cash and within our target range, as you can see. We certainly have enough cash to meet our liabilities. The current ratio of assets to liabilities is 1.4. This indicator makes sure we're liquid, and as you can see, we're a bit over our target. I'll talk about some of the reasons why here in a bit. We have year-to-date operating surplus of $125,000 as compared to a budgeted deficit of $8,000. As you can see, we're over our target in that area. But this fluctuates month to month and doesn't necessarily mean that at the year end we will have a surplus. Our assessment collections are at about $1.2 million, which is 97% collected. So as you can see, we're in a strong position, and that's where we were at about this time last quarter. Excuse me. A couple things to point out as explanation for our operating surplus. If you can see on the variance analysis, due to COVID and the coronavirus, we had some events and programs canceled, which ended up in a small variance between what was budgeted and the actual revenue. On the expense side, same thing because of those canceled events, as well as we had a couple of management positions remain open for about the first half of the year. We had to postpone our fire mitigation project, and we had lower than expected costs for gate repairs and phone. So those are some of the areas where we ended up with our operating surplus of $125,000 for the month of May. The month end of our reserve fund is $12.8 million. This fund, as you probably know, is set up to repair and replace our capital assets. Contributions are put into the fund from our assessments at a rate based on our reserve study, which is done by a company called Association Reserves. It's a multi-year study, which helps us, a multi-year plan, which helps us prepare the repair and replacement of our common area components like roofs, roads, and mechanical equipment. I'll talk a little bit later about a reserve fund project that did get approved at this meeting. We have our capital improvement fund, and this several years ago the board set this fund up whereby contributions are made from our assessments each month in order to pay for new assets. The reserve fund is strictly used for our existing assets, but when we want to enhance or add assets to the community, we use the funds from the capital improvement fund. The total balance is $265,000. If you have any further questions about the financials, you can always reach out to Mike Peckham. He's very happy to answer any questions that you may have. I'll move on to the management report. As I said, Christine now, our executive director, gives the management report. She discussed the new face mask order from the city of Mesa and Maricopa County, and the board decided it will have a meeting to determine how those new orders affect our reopening plan for the community. She also updated the board on the status of our 2020 objectives and our projects. The board set this out at the beginning of the year, these different objectives. As you can see, the splash pad enhancement has been completed. There are several projects that are on track to to be completed in 2020, the landscape service RFP and project selection, playground equipment replacement, enclave vehicle gate entry access system, RFP, amenity control access system, and a full policy review. There's a few projects that are behind, investment advisory firm selection, and enclave fire risk mitigation. That, of course, is due to, we're right in the middle of wildfire season. It was supposed to commence in March, but was postponed from coronavirus. And now that we're in the wildfire season, that will begin once the season is over. Strategic planning is a bit behind. Our CPEG image study recommendations and short-term rental recommendations. Christine also went over our community standards, gave an update on the violations that have been opened, closed, and escalated. Our social media platforms continue to see visibility. She discussed that. Our likes on Instagram, our followers on Facebook. We had a few lifestyle events in May. Cinco de Mayo at the trailhead, where we provided free churros, virtual tequila tasting, and a few food trucks that did come up to the trailhead for providing food and drink options to residents. We moved on to new business, our fire mitigation project. As I mentioned, we contracted with the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management to do fire mitigation in our enclave common areas. We had a couple of residents with concerns about the amount of vegetation being cut down in the common area adjacent to their property. The concern was that it would disrupt, too much would be cut down and it would disrupt the habitat for wildlife that lives there. We as the board assured the homeowners that our intention is to balance the need for fire mitigation and safety of property with the preservation of vegetation and wildlife in our community that we all love. The board agreed to set up a meeting between the homeowners and Captain Peroni and to establish a modified reduced scope of work to ensure that only the bare minimum of vegetation is removed. So then we moved on to our communications committee. The board approved the appointment of Kelly Intagliata as the communications committee chairperson. Our existing chairperson had to step away for some other commitments, but we thank Kelly for stepping into that role. The audit committee then gave us an update. Fred Glenn is our audit committee chairperson, and he gave a report about the process of the 2019 financial statement audit. Butler Hansen is the association's auditing firm, and they provided a draft of the audit to CCMC's internal shared services team as well as the audit committee. Questions were asked, they reviewed it, and after the review, the audit committee unanimously agreed to recommend the revised audit for board approval. And the board voted to unanimously approve the audit of the 2019 financial statements at our June 25th board meeting. It is worth noting that Butler Hansen did not provide a management letter with the 2019 audit. So they did not have any recommendations for management concerning internal controls and are satisfied with CCMC's processes and practices. So that was good news. Then the next item of business was to select a landscape contractor and approve the landscape maintenance contract. As we've talked about in previous board meetings, the board formed a landscape committee in 2019 to assist management on all landscape matters. The committee is made up of 7 residents with varying backgrounds, and board liaison Tony Reed, as well as Crystal Bromley, our community manager, and oversight by Christine Now, our executive director. The landscape expense for the association is about 1/3 of the budget, so it's extremely important to the board that it's addressed properly and thoroughly. And one of the roles of the committee, along with the management, is to review the performance of the landscape provider. The committee determined, and the board did approve, that it was time to issue a landscape request for proposal for a new landscape maintenance contract for a few reasons. Excuse me. To conduct due diligence. We have had the same landscape provider, for the past 12 years under the same contract. Want to make sure that our providers engaging in best practices and the industry standard for costs and services are being provided. It is also to reset our approach and expectations. How often are they trimming trees? Are they properly irrigating? Our landscape has matured over the last 12 years, so our scope of work needs may have changed. Also to address compliance and performance issues, as well as to conduct a cost-benefit analysis. Are we getting the best services for the price? Hundreds of hours were spent evaluating and reviewing the responses from 9 landscape companies. They conducted an objective and thorough analysis, and ultimately the committee unanimously recommended to award the landscape contract to ProQual Landscaping. This will include all the tree trimming, all the grounds maintenance, which includes grass, as well as the monuments, enclave monuments, and flowers. The board unanimously agreed and voted to terminate the current contract with Four Peaks Landscape and enter into a 3-year contract with ProQual Landscaping, effective July 31st. I would like to personally thank the members of the Landscape Committee. They spent hundreds of hours on this project, and we are very grateful for their willingness to serve on this committee. It's an important area in this community. We all love the natural beauty of Las Sendas, and we appreciate that they put in the time to make sure that it is maintained properly. Our last order of business was to hear the playground replacement working group recommendations. As I mentioned before, these capital assets have a finite useful life. Boulder Mountain play equipment was replaced in 2016, and it was time to look at our remaining 3 parks, Sonoran Heights, the Trailhead, and the park south of McDowell near Gray Fox. According to our reserve study, all the equipment in the remaining 3 parks is beyond its useful life. And according to our inspection reports that we do quarterly to ensure our equipment is up to code and in good working order, repairs are needed at every park. So as I mentioned earlier, we make contributions to the reserve fund throughout the useful life of the assets to cover the cost of replacement. So money will be used from the reserve fund to cover that equipment. The working group received proposals from 3 playground equipment companies, spent numerous hours evaluating designs and plans, warranties, ADA compliance, shade options, and cost. Each company presented its proposal to the board at a board workshop on June 18th. The board had an opportunity to ask questions about all of those things, the designs, the warranties, and the costs. And after a thorough evaluation, the working group recommended to the board that they approve the design proposals submitted by Place-Based Designs for Compan equipment. And the board voted unanimously to approve the working group's recommendation. We'll have some more information coming on the plans and the designs and the timing of it from management here in the next couple days, actually. So that wraps up the June 25th board meeting. If you have any questions, you can please reach out to me or any other board member. We're happy to answer questions, or the management team. And we hope to see you at the next board meeting in July. Thank you.